Good evening. I'm Peter Gelb. Thank you, Caroline. We're very pleased to be here tonight. This is the first of our series of works in process programs devoted to the Met for this season. As you know, I'm the general manager of the Metropolitan Opera, and which is not always so easy to manage, but we're getting ready with great excitement for our new season that's coming up. You know, tonight also meant to have been included in this discussion were Yannick Nézet-Séguin, the music director of the Met, who's also the conductor of the opening night production of Dead Man Walking, and also Susan Graham, the mezzo-soprano who is singing the role of the mother of the murderer Desrochers. Unfortunately, both of them are recovering from not being well, and which is a good reminder for all of you to get your shots for the fall, I think. But in opera, you know, everything is a question of timing, so we're very happy that their health will be peaking in time for our premiere, which is early next week. So we're here to talk about the Met's first production ever of Dead Man Walking, which is one of the most powerful operas ever written. It finally comes to our stage a week from tomorrow night. Dead Man Walking is an opera about spiritual redemption and a strong commentary against the death penalty. It was very timely when it received its world premiere in San Francisco in 2000, and it is just as timely, if not more so, today, particularly today when spirituality seems to be in very short supply. Because of its powerful themes and a genius score in libretto by Jake Heggie and Terrence McNally, Dead Man Walking is the most performed opera composed in the 21st century. And we have assembled a great team to bring it to you on the stage of the Met. To my right is the nun from Louisiana, who in 1982 found herself to be the pen pal of a man on death row convicted of murder and rape. She went to Angola State Prison to visit him and became his spiritual advisor and support system in the weeks and months before his execution. The experience of being with him until the very end turned into a calling, and Sister Helen Prejean made it her life's mission to fight injustice and battle against the death penalty. Her moving 1993 memoir, Dead Man Walking, became the inspiration for the Academy Award-winning film directed by Tim Robbins starring Susan Sarandon, as well as for this opera. Please welcome the fearless Sister Helen Prejean. And next to Sister Helen is the celebrated director who made his Met debut at the end of last season with his riveting production of Don Giovanni. In fact, his Met debut was meant to be Dead Man Walking in 2020, but the pandemic prevented that from happening. So the order of your operas at the Met were reversed. On Broadway, he's directed many productions, including The Network, West Side Story, The Crucible, A View from the Bridge, for which he won a Tony Award for Best Director. He's directed film, opera, and he's the artistic director of the Toneel Group in Amsterdam, very highly regarded theater company. We're thrilled that his vision for Dead Man Walking is finally coming to fruition on our stage. Better late than never. Please welcome Ivo van Hove. Later in this evening, we'll be joined by our two stars, Joyce DiDonato and Ryan McKinny. But first, we're going to talk with Sister Helen and Ivo. Dead Man Walking, I'm sure many of you know the story of Dead Man Walking, either because you've seen one of the many productions of it or have seen the film. There is a difference between the film and the opera. most notably in that in the film, the guilt of the man on death row is not clear until the end of the film. In the opera, there is no doubt that he's guilty from the start. And that's not meant to be a spoiler alert, obviously. But the opera is about Sister Helen's battle for his spiritual redemption and whether Desrochers will accept responsibility for his crimes. The story is about this murderer who participates in the senseless and brutal murder of two innocent young lovers and the rape of one of them. So, and it's really a question, the question in the opera is, will Sister Helen be able to redeem his soul before his execution date arrives? So, Sister Helen, since this is your story, tell us how it all began.
When Tim Robbins was writing the screenplay of Dead Man Walking, he would say with his little smirk, the nun is in over her head. And believe me, I started out with bona fide what nuns do, teaching 7th and 8th grade boys English, grammar, and religion, and I never dreamed that I would end up being with people on death row. So when you hear Sister Helen in the aria, Joyce, singing my journey to the truth, it's all been a journey. And of course, we're all on a journey. I mean, life is a journey. Things unfold for us. I wrote this man, and it was just to be a pen pal. And I call it Sneaky Jesus, Part 1. There's 2 parts to Sneaky Jesus. Part 1 was, hey, Sister Helen, you want to be a pen pal to somebody on death row? And I was working in an inner city neighborhood. I was awakening to justice in a lot of ways. So I said, yeah, I could write. I thought I was only going to be writing letters. And then when I did decide to go visit him, he had nobody, in the visitor form, and he's all excited. He said, well, look, I'm a Catholic. You're a nun. Would you be my spiritual advisor? So I go, fill out the form. Don't dream that 2 years later, when he's electrocuted to death by the state of Louisiana, the only one that's going to be able to be with him in the death house for the 4 days before the execution, and then there with him saying, look at my face when they do this, is going to be me. And to me, the way grace happens in our lives is that it comes on under us as we need it. So that's why I say it was Sneaky Jesus, because I thought I was only going to be writing letters. So here I write letters. Here I'm with this man. And the experiencing of that execution of that human being that I had known and seen his remorse, seen him change, seen him take responsibility for what, and it was a journey. The Joseph Desrochers character is harder. And in the film of Dead Man Walking, there's a compilation of 2 characters because Robert Lee Willie was the second man I took on death row. Swastika on his arm, tough guy, electric chair, don't bother me, man. And truthfully, it didn't. He walked with a little bounce in his step. He had been in Marion. He was a tough man. And they're combined. And so you see that in Joseph Desrochers, too. What I love about what Terrence McNally did, you know, when Peter was mentioning this, we know he did it. You see him do it. And the prologue, everything uncoils from that act. And you see him non-repentant. You see him blaming other people. And the audience's journey is, well, we just saw what he did. If anybody deserves death, bring it on. Because that's what the death penalty is about. These people do these terrible crimes. They deserve to die, right? So the audience is on a great journey, too. What I love about the opera is you have the fullness of art. You have the fullness of drama. And you have the music taking us into places in our hearts we don't even know we have. I think it's the only opera ever done with 1.5 minutes of silence, because when Joseph Desrochers does get his justice in the end, there's no sound, no music, only the sound of the machines. And it takes us all then into the silence of our own hearts. It's a piece of great meditation. We're the only society, Western industrialized society in the world, that still kills our citizens. We've set up a system. Opera, films, the arts are the only way we have of bringing us close to the reality and to lead us into meditation about what are we doing. Because it's a pretty secret ritual. Only a few people are admitted into executions, just a few. And there's no direct witness. There have been 2 court cases trying to make executions public, and they've both been defeated. So art is what we got in the book. I've been amazed that a book can so change people, because you're using your own imagination when you read a book. You're quiet, and you're not debating, and you can go to deep places. So I am so glad the Met is doing this. I'm glad to be a little part of it. To me, it's all a miracle that we're getting that story out and opening up the curtain to bring you, each of you, into deep places of your own hearts, where I think it's going to take you. So thank you. I'm glad to be part of this.
Thank you so much. I think the miracle is you, Sister Helen. Ivo, maybe if you could talk a little bit about, perhaps, you and I guess I always lose track of when we start talking about projects like this. It was about 7 years ago, maybe? Or?
2016, I know exactly.
You know exactly. That's why you're the director. I know I asked you to do it, but you didn't have to say yes, of course. What about the story appealed to you and made you want to direct this?
Well, indeed, I knew the opera, but I never had heard it nor seen it, because in Europe it has been played, produced, but not in the big houses. So and not in the places where I was at that time anyway. So I'd never seen it. So I think I've told you, I'm sure I've told you, I have to listen to it very carefully, and then I can make up my mind, And when I listened to it, and you mentioned it already, the music is contemporary music, of course, but it's also very accessible, but never tacky or never sentimental in the wrong way, It's emotional in the right way, and so for me the decision was immediately. Normally, when I say I have to think about something, that means that I have to think about how to say no. So I didn't have to think about this. It was immediately when I heard it through, together with the libretto, reading it, I was immediately convinced. And for us, because I'm European, as you hear clearly, for us the death penalty is like non-existent. You just shouldn't do it. We don't even think about it. But I thought, and the word you have used it a lot, and that was also the first word that I wrote down in my notebook. It's about spiritual things. It's a story, of course, because that's the great thing about the opera, that it's American writing, in the good way. But I love American writing, as you know. I love Arthur Miller, I love Eugene O'Neill, I did Tennessee Williams, So I love American writing and American authors, because they are capable of telling very personal stories, and at the same time telling stories that are societal, that talk about society and about things that are themes that are very important in the bigger society. And that's what American theater also makes so great, I think. Tony Kushner also, I shouldn't forget him. They are the masters of that. So, and in this opera, these two things come together, the very personal story and also the big meaning, because it also poses the question, almost in every scene, do we deserve, as a society, to kill somebody, even when this somebody is a murderer that has killed himself? We in Europe think no. But for me, it was like, when you think it on a higher level, this matter of life and death, that became for me very mesmerizing and very important. And it's beautifully written. Every scene gives new perspectives. It's not only that every scene tells, you shouldn't do it. It's not like didactic in that way. It's really, it makes you think about it. What's my position? Oh, now he's saying this. Well, that's an interesting thing. Never thought about it that way. So these different perspectives, that's what I try to bring to the stage anyway. And that makes it for me important to do it. And of course, this 1.5 minutes of silence, which is like a magic thing at the end of the opera. After all this music, suddenly there is nothing, And that's when the first time when we did it in the rehearsal, coincidentally, Heggie, the composer, was there, which was for me frightening because it was the first time that I had to do the whole finale with all the actors and with the chorus and with everybody. And he was there sitting, and then the piano was just playing, and we had then this 1.5 minutes of silence, and well, I knew exactly what I had directed, but I was crying. It's a very strong, intense, strong, emotional moment. And it goes to your heart, and you must have a heart of stone, I think, if you're not sensible to it. So I think it's a great piece of opera for also in the 21st century, and a very important piece of opera.
Thank you, Ivo. Sister Helen, I wanted to ask you about the book that you wrote. So, after this experience, did you then go on to have more experiences like this?
I came out of that execution chamber that night. Pat was executed right after midnight, electrocuted to death, okay? And the sisters were waiting for me, and I was so cold. It was the beginning of April. I was just chilled to the bone. And the first thing I did was throw up. And in the night, in the dark, and the last thing I thought I was going to do was write a book. Because, see, I'm from Louisiana. We talk to each other. I thought a book was kind of a passive thing. The poor things have to just sit on the shelves and... They really got to sit there.
There were a few writers from the South,
There are some writers from the South. Well, anyway, but then I kind of got drugged into writing the book, drawn into it that I could maybe tell these stories. And I had a great editor at Random House, Jason Epstein. If I had not had him, you would never have heard of Dead Man Walking. And he let me write the whole first draft, and then I went up and we sat together and looked at it. And he said, Sister Helen, nobody's going to read your book. And I knew I'd written good stuff because you got the details and stuff. He said, you are so into the human rights of this man that he shouldn't be executed. You use all the time. And the reader is waiting for one thing. What did he do and what about the victims? And if you don't talk about the crime in the first 10 pages of this book, nobody's going to read your book. They got to see that you really get it, that people are suffering, and that you feel the outrage. And there is this elemental human outrage in us when we hear about a terrible crime. We can say that in principle in Europe or wherever we're against the death penalty, and we hear about a terrible crime, a mother hijacked with her children, and we feel that elemental rage in us. Well, he deserves to die. And of course, the moral question for us is who deserves to kill him? So Jason worked with me on that book and helped me shape that story. And so when Tim Robbins went to write the screenplay, he said it was the easiest screenplay he ever wrote because I take you over to both sides. And I made mistakes on both sides. I made mistakes about the victim's family. So when you can see that sextet in the opera where the victim's families, I'm in the middle, and they're saying, you don't know what it's like. And then the mother of Joseph DeRocha, you don't know what it's like, see your child slip through your fingers. And I'm turning from one to the other going, I'm sorry, and I am sorry. Because I didn't reach out to the victims' families at first. I didn't know what to do with them. They were in such pain. I thought, well, I can't help them. And I stayed away. And again, Jason Epstein, he saw I had downplayed that in the first draft of the book. And he looked me right in the eye and he said, well, you kind of letting yourself off easy that you didn't reach out to the victims' families saying you'd never done this before. He said, it was cowardice, wasn't it? You were scared, weren't you? Well, yeah. He said, look, when you write your book, don't just take people on the peaks of the waves where you do it great. Take them in the troughs where you make mistakes, and then they'll trust you. And he was invaluable. So he helped me with the book, and then Random House really got behind that book. I mean, they got me on talk shows, and so good reviews started coming in about it, and the book just, it sold 800,000 copies today. At the end of the film, Tim Robbins has across the screen in big letters, read Sister Helen Prejean. All right.
That's good. Thank you for that explanation. Actually, I'm learning a lot today because I'm learning. I understand how not only Tim Robbins but the brilliant playwright Terrence McNally, who wrote this extraordinary libretto, how you obviously gave him the roadmap.
Yeah.
For
Terrence said that. He saw the film.
Right.
Because he and Jake were supposed to get together. Lotfi Mansouri wanted a new opera for the millennium.
For the San Francisco Opera. Right.
Something light and bubbly. That was the original thing, to do something light and bubbly, and they had a meeting, Terrence and Jake.
That's why we're presenting it on opening night at the Met. We wanted something light and bubbly. I think in the times we live in today, it's important, very important to present works like this, and we're so proud to be doing it. But Ivo, you never saw the film, did you?
No, I never saw the opera nor the film.
Right, which is, it's good. You have a clean slate.
But I always do that when I did Don Giovanni. I pretend that I'm the first, that Mozart just was there and gave me the thing, and then I do it for the first time.
Even though
it's the best way for a director to deal with material that has been done a lot.
Right.
But you listen to the music.
Yes, of course.
Right. So before we thank you for verifying that. So before we move on, I think it's very important just to give the audience, since this opera has been produced so many times, I think it's very important for the audience to get just a little glimpse of what you're doing. And we have a few images from the rehearsal from last week, which will be projected, I guess, up there. One of the things that, for those of you who don't know Ivo's work, one of your signature kind of theatrical trademarks is which has been much copied and emulated by other directors, perhaps lesser directors, is your use of film and video as a theatrical technique, live video and film. And so I just wanted, maybe you could talk a little bit about
what you see here is a piece of the prologue, the so-called spoiler of the whole thing, namely that you see everything what has happened. And during the prologue, you see a movie, actually. You see the movie of the objective reality of what has happened. And later on, we use that material, for instance, at the moment that at the end of the Act 1, that Helen faints because it's all too much for her, emotionally, mentally. She's very tired, hasn't eaten in days, And then I have the video, like from the point of view of the victims, that's if Helen sees it from the point of view of the victims. So we use that objective video in different subjective ways afterwards. More?
Yeah, we have a few other images.
Here you see it a little bit on the stage. On the stage, that's what the stage is. A little bit. It looks much larger than here on stage.
We have a much bigger stage than that screen.
Yeah, and then you see it's not really a prison. We call it a mental space, And you don't see the normal prison elements. So you see also him sitting there. He's just sitting there. He could just walk away, but it's like more like a mental prison, you could say. That's of course Joyce and Ryan. That's a piece of the moment of the hearing, and that's a fabulous moment. Susan Graham, that's her big aria, and she delivers that in the most amazing way. It's really very emotional. A mother that fights until the end for the life of her son. Here you see a moment when Helen, it's in the second act. You see that's a very specific thing. On top. You cannot see it very well on this picture, but there is a projection of Joyce, who is live on stage, and it's filmed live. And we see her, at the same time, we see her nightmare projected on the big walls around her. You know, so what she expresses, you also see. We can look into her mind, you could say. And this is the most difficult thing. Well, it looks simple, but because this is a beautiful moment in the second act. We see Helen in a scene at her home, at the nunnery, and we see him, of course, in his prison cell. So what we did is we film both scenes as if they talk to each other, because they think about each other the whole time. You know, and so, but downstairs on the stage, they just do their talking to the normal person. So Helen talks to one of the other sisters, and he talks to himself, actually, you know, at that moment. But it looks as if they are talking to each other. It's actually technically quite difficult to realize, because it's millimeter work.
Thank you very much. It's really an extraordinary production. With that, I think it's time we should hear our first musical segment. So Susan Graham is on the men tonight, as I mentioned earlier, and she actually was going to sing the aria from the image that we saw earlier of her appearing before the pardon board to plead for the life of her son. But we're very fortunate that the excellent mezzo and Met veteran Yves Gigliotti has kindly agreed to step in to sing this aria, because we thought it was important for you to hear it, and she sings it beautifully. So Yves will sing the aria, the mother of Joseph de Richet, when she appears in front of the pardon board to plead for her son's life. And now, please welcome Met Assistant Conductor Jonathan Kelly on piano, and Yves Gigliotti.
Is this what I talk into? I feel like I'm on TV or something. Do y'all just ask me questions, or do I just talk? Sister Helen helped me write something. I don't read too good, my eyes. I'm sorry.
To spare her son's life. Nothing more, nothing less.
Dyslexia?
He left school in the 9th grade, went with a bad crowd. There was drugs and some crime involved. I believe there was a woman and a child. None of this excuses the terrible things my Joe has been convicted of. I'm not saying that. I'm saying Joe, my Joe is not a bad boy. Not my Joe. There is good there. There is good there too. In my Joe. In my Joe. See this pretty comb, genuine tortoiseshell made in Japan. A Mother's Day gift from my Joe. A boy who is all bad does not give his mother something like this. He does not teach his younger half-brothers to hunt and fish and play and run and drive. What you all say my Joe did is so terrible. I can't think of it without dying some myself. If I was that girl's father, I'd hate my boy too. I ask you to hate the crime and not the criminal. We have all suffered in both, haven't we all suffered enough? Haven't we? Haven't we? Haven't we? This morning there was a dead cat left on my porch. My boys are tormented at school. Strangers curse me at the market. Only yesterday, a woman. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't think that I could cry anymore. I just don't know what good my Joe's been dead will do. Will it satisfy you? Will it bring the younger boy back? I would gladly give my whole life to
Very powerfully performed. Before we introduce Joyce and Ryan, I wanted to ask you one question, Sister Helen, which is that Jake Heggie had made a point of saying that you provided enormous support to him emotionally when he was writing the music for Dead Man Walking. What was your relationship with him like during that process?
First conversation on the phone, he's calling me. He goes, "Sister, you know we're gonna do an opera." I go, "Jake, I don't know booscat about opera." That was our beginning. I said, I just got 2 requests, because you have to trust the artist. I had to trust him to do the film. You turn your work over, and you trust them, okay. I said, but I got just 2 requests. You're not going to do that 8-tonal stuff, are you? I mean, like when we leave, we're going to be able to hum a little melody or something, you know? He said, oh yeah, okay, you got that, because I write for the human voice.
Thank you for that.
And then the other thing was, as long as it has the theme of redemption, and it's everybody's redemption, including the audience, all of us. And he said, you got that. So we would have phone conversations. And when he wrote that part of the sextet, which he considers the heart of the opera, where you have the victim's family singing on one side and mama singing on the other and me in the middle, he said, Sister Helen, I think I... And he's on the phone and he's plinking on the piano and singing to me parts of it, you know, in this roughest fashion you can imagine. I could see the power of it. And then when it was performed, excerpts of the opera for the people putting up the money for the opera, the bank people came to listen to stuff. And he said, and they were all crying. We did the sextet. And I said, Jake, maybe they could see their money going down the drain. So we've had that kind of relationship, and I love him. I tell him these Boudreaux Thibodeau jokes from Louisiana, and he knows one Ole and Lena joke, which is pitiful, but we share jokes and we share our lives very much. So he's very special to me.
In the interest of time, I won't ask you to repeat the joke, but maybe afterwards. So now we're ready to hear a scene from Sister Helen, a scene between Sister Helen, sung by the great Joyce DiDonato, and Joseph Desrochers, played also by the great Ryan McKinny, who is not as well known as Joyce, but I think after these performances, his star will rise. They'll be singing their Act 1 duet, which is I Believe in the Here and Now, and the Truth Will Set You Free. So, Ivo, do you want to add anything to the significance of this particular duet, or?
As you were saying already, this is actually one of the central things in the whole show. It's about her whole journey is to push him or to get him that far himself that he makes a decision to tell the truth, and that it will liberate him, and that takes him a long time. Actually, it takes him until the last second of the show almost, you know, and that's a wonderful thing, and it's a hard thing, and I can understand that also, you know, from his point of view, that admitting such a horrible thing, that you really did it, and that you have to face it, that you have to face the victims, you know, that's a hard thing. I can understand. So as a director, I always try also to identify myself with the bad guys in this case, and that's really important. And that's also what this in this scene is. Both positions are visible. Her pushing him is visible, and he, having a really hard time giving in to that and really being angry about it. That she keeps pushing him that way.
And this is the first moment in the opera where she actually breaks through. Begins to break through.
Yeah.
So please welcome Jonathan Kelly once again on piano, and Joyce DiDonato and Ryan McKinny.
Sorry I'm late.
I figured you were giving up on me. Everyone else has.
I gave you my word, Joe. You're stuck with me.
17 minutes. That's how long it took her. 17 goddamn minutes. That's how long it takes to decide if a man should live or die.
We're appealing to the governor.
Dream on, sister. Dream on.
I don't dream, Joe. I pray and I work. And sometimes I fail, sometimes I don't. But I pray and I work.
But you believe in something.
Don't you?
Not like you. Not like you. I believe in the here and now. I believe in what's real. I believe that they're going to kill me unless a miracle happens. I believe that people like you haven't got a clue where people like me are coming from.
I think I do, Joe. I do.
I believe that I'm bad, way bad. I believe you never met anyone as bad as me.
I believe that people can do terrible things. I believe that you do terrible things.
I'm bad, sister.
I don't believe that
I'm
people I don't believe that you're bad, Joe.
I am, sister.
I believe that people can acknowledge their wrongs and be forgiven. Be forgiven. I believe.
I'm sorry, but I don't see any forgiveness in lethal injection. I don't see it.
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
Heart and soul strong.
Forgiveness.
Heart and soul.
I hate it when you sound like a nun.
Two young people are dead because of you. Their parents will never see them again. I believe you should admit you did.
What?
And say you're sorry
What?
to the parents of those children.
Right, sure. And give the state the right to kill me. You may be a good nun. You'd make a lousy lawyer, sister. We both know I'm on a railroad track to hell.
Truth, Joe.
We both know that no one's gonna forgive
I do too, Joe.
The truth will
Set you free, say it again, Joe.
The truth will
Say it
set you
again.
free.
The truth will set you free. Yes,
Well, that was spectacular. So, you know, obviously we're so fortunate to have the two of you singing these roles on the stage of the Met. And this is such an important opera for us to be presenting. So obviously there's a lot to talk about. So, but perhaps you can start with the duet you just sang, which is such a, we were talking about it before you performed it, as being the kind of the first moment when you're actually finally having some impact on him. So maybe if you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think one of the really powerful parts of this is the second time we see them in the opera, even though they've been meeting and becoming friends the time. But right before this scene is the parole board meeting that Eve just sang. And there's an outburst where the parents of the two victims explode and say, this boy she's talking about, that's the one who killed and raped my daughter and stabbed her. And it's this moment that Sister Helen was talking about, that she tries to reach out to the parents and say, I'm just trying to help. And they say, where were you? We needed your help. We're good Catholics. We take the sacraments, and you haven't been here for us. And it's the first time in the opera that she's hit with this wave of an entire other group of people that are suffering. And so I enter this scene really angry. And the line that, I've never felt it before, but when he says 17 minutes, that's all it takes for the parole board to decide. And my first thought is, how long did you take? So it's such a human, visceral meeting of two people that are both angry. And they still, the thing I love about Sister Helen is she stays the course. I gave you my word, Joe, I'm here, but I don't like you much right now. But she stays the course to get him to open his heart, or to try to.
Yeah, and I think one interesting thing about, from Joe's perspective here, is in the first scene, we don't get any inkling that he has remorse, and we don't quite get it here, but we hear him say over and over how bad he is. And I think that's an important thing to understand about. He feels that, which many of us do, doing a bad thing is the same as being a bad person. And I think that a lot of this hinges on that. And so, you know, and there's all these iterations of it, this screaming, I'm bad, and then this kind of like withdrawn, I'm bad. And I think that starts to be the crack for me that she steps into with this, the truth will set you free. And you feel this moment of like, I don't quite know what that means to me yet, but there's something there. And then he immediately has to reject it because he doesn't feel worthy of that, actually. And then that's why we have to keep going on into Act 2.
And the guard comes in and says, time's up. And she was so close, and they were just starting to get through, but that's the life in this thing, is time is up. And that's a theme that will go through the whole opera, is the clicking, the clock that is ticking and going, and there's never enough time to get there.
You know, Joyce, this opera has obviously played a big role in your life as an artist and as a person. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well,
Or a lot.
it is true, and I first sang the role 21 years ago.
Performance I saw when I was at Juilliard.
He was in the audience. Oh, that's lovely. Young man, that's lovely. No, but it was, you do not encounter this work as a performer and leave the same person. You just don't. And that, it doesn't matter the role that you're singing or if you could be in the chorus. The young boy just wrote me, Eric Milligan, he's coming to see the show, the young boy at City Opera. It's a piece that changes you. And in the case of singing the role of Sister Helen and saying words like, "Look at me, Joe, I will be the face of love for you." I know it's pretend, but it's also not. It's something that it calls you to a higher place as a human being. You all feel it tonight. She starts talking about sneaky Jesus, and you're like, okay, sister, I'm gonna... It's opened up a world for me where I now will do work in prisons. We're actually going to bring a concert version of Dead Man Walking into Sing Sing, maximum security prison. That's in conjunction...
That hasn't been announced, so keep that a secret, please.
I'm so sorry.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay. Well, but it's a wonderful cooperation between the Met and Carnegie Hall. I've been going there for about 8 or 9 years now.
And because of you, that we're doing it.
Yeah, and the men in this program, they learn to write music and play instruments. They're going to sing the chorus. So I was up 2 weeks ago rehearsing with them the big choral number on death row called Woman on the Tier, when Sister Helen arrives on death row. And it's a pretty aggressive choral number, and it's complicated musically. And I'm rehearsing it with them. I was like, come on, guys. There's like 12 of them. I was like, it has to be a lot more brutal, you know, Woman on the Tier. And literally, and it was a real call of the actual prison, and there was this moment of, yeah, like that. But you guys know that. And so we're gonna go in and do this incredible work with them and bring the truth of this awful world where everybody is suffering, and to try and crack open some hearts and try and actually really live what we're walking. And that is what, and I think Ryan, you will also can talk about this and second it. It's a transformative piece in a profound way. Thank you, Sister Helen.
So Ryan, why don't you talk about how it's affected your life as an artist?
Yeah, so I've done one other production of this at the Lyric Opera of Chicago in 2019, but I've kind of lived with this piece for a long time since I saw Joyce do it many years ago. And one of the big things that's happened over the last few years is when I was preparing this role back in, I think probably 2016, I started, actually asked Janae Bridges, another great mezzo who sings Sister Helen. I was talking with her about you, Helen, and thinking about what's something to do that could help. You know, there's like the political things you could do, write letters and whatever, and I think your advice was just reach out to some people. And so I wrote letters to some folks on death row and actually became very good friends with one of them. His name was Terrence McNally. And I visited him several times at the Polensky unit in Texas, and we wrote pretty regularly for, 6 years. And he actually, he and I talked about this piece because I didn't want to use my friendship with him as some sort of, media thing. But he said, if people could know me as me and not just my case, I would love if you would talk about me. And he was this amazing poet and artist and very funny and really I consider him my friend. And he tragically took his own life earlier this year after his case was rejected by the Supreme Court. And so in this work that we're doing now, I kind of carry him with me and the whole system that, this haven't we all suffered enough is such a line that sits in me when we talk about this piece, because it's not just about death row, it's about our whole way of looking at human beings, and can we see them as whole human beings? Can we put ourselves in their shoes? You know, Terrence was a black man who grew up in a very poor neighborhood with no, you know, parents to help him and had mental health struggles. And if I was in that situation, could I say for sure that I wouldn't do the things he did? I don't know. There's no way for me to know that. So I think one of the great things about this piece is that it really opens you up to see everyone involved, not just Joseph, but the parents, Sister Helen, the warden, the guards, everybody as full human beings. And I think that that's really what we need in this world right now, is to see each other with all of our flaws as entire human beings.
The one thing I come away with too, and I've spoken about this with the opera, is that it's easy to say, oh, it's a death penalty opera, or it's about social justice. And I see it as really, I think, maybe the greatest love story that the opera world knows, which is saying a lot. We're known for our love stories, right? But if I may, maybe you want to talk about Patrick and at the end and what he did, because I find this to be such an unbelievable example of selfless love, and it's depicted well in the opera.
Actually, you taught me this. I mean, this dimension of love that I'd never reflected. We were in Madrid doing the opera. Remember that press conference? It must have lasted 2 hours because the stories were so good, nobody wanted to leave. The guy that was the death row inmate had come from Shoot and Cut, Texas.
Cut and shoot.
Cut and shoot. He was a real guy. Yeah, anyway. So here, Joyce is talking about love, and I'm going, yeah, love, because actually, this is what happened with Pat toward the end, where he actually said to me, look, sister, you've been with me through all this. You've really, really been right there by my side, but you can't see this at the end because it could scar you to see this. I mean, it's 1,900 volts were going to be shot through his body. I mean, it's terrible stuff. And I said to him, all I knew was there was no way this human being was going to be killed, and he didn't have a face to look at. And I just came back with, look, Pat, I don't know what it's going to do to me. It's not about what it's going to do to me, but you're not dying alone without, I'll be that face of love for you. You look at me when they do this to you. And Joyce pointed out, when we die, we all want to have somebody holding our hand, somebody there with us. Who wants to die alone? None of us. And he was willing to do that to protect me. That it was a profound act of love for me that he was giving. And this is where you really bring it home to me. This is a mutuality between human beings. It's not the good nun going in there with the bad criminal. We all have that mixture inside of us. And Joyce, you helped me see that. I'd never seen that before. About, yeah, he was willing to give that to me, to protect me, and die alone. I'd never thought of it.
And that is, for me, what I leave with this piece. I think it's one of the great things that opera does better than anything else, is it turns up the temperature on everything, every emotion. And in this case, we have the extremity of the worst. And if we can look at the worst, and there can be a crack in that armor, and there can be a chance to get in there with light and love, then we all have a chance. But if we immediately say, okay, yeah, we're all worthy of love except that one, that could also be us. And I think that is the bold and radical storytelling of this piece. It calls us to be higher and to love harder than we're willing to do. One of the things I talked about with the guys 2 weeks ago, this idea of forgiveness. There's a beautiful moment in the second act. Sister Helen is with her best friend, Sister Rose. And Sister Helen hasn't been sleeping, and she's getting more and more debil, and the execution date is coming closer. And Sister Rose says, we're really worried about you. And I'm like, no, I'll be fine. And she says, have you forgiven him? Meaning, have I forgiven Joe? And I say, what are you talking about? Of course I have. Of course, I go up there all the time. How can you even ask me that question? And she says, have you really forgiven him? And I was telling that to the men at Sing Sing, and they all shook their head, and it was like, yeah, true forgiveness. That's another story. And you felt it in them, as you were saying, Ryan, you know, when somebody says, I did a bad thing, therefore I'm bad. But either forgiveness is available to all of us, or none of us. And that is what we have to crack open in this opera and examine it, you know, and see what we do with it when we go home at night and sneaky Jesus is doing his thing.
But you know what too, Joyce, is in Owen Hart, he's pretty fierce. I mean, he's really mad at me, and some of that anger is really justified. The real person in the book is Lloyd LeBlanc, whose son David, just 17, was killed by Pat Saunier and his brother. And he is eaten up with rage, as you see in Owen Hart. And his journey to forgiveness, he taught me the real meaning, the depth of it. If you even look at the word, it means to give before. Forgive. And the journey into it for this victim's family who had lost his son was he began to realize that the rage was eating him up and he was losing himself. Because he was a kind person. He always helped people. He was angry all the time, and he's making his wife cry. And in the real life thing that happened with him, when he came to that moment of grace to realize that he was being killed by this, he put his hand out like this, and he just said, They killed my boy, but I'm not gonna let them kill me. And forgiveness meant that he would not let the love and integrity in his own life be taken away because of what had happened and what they had done. And there's a little glimpse in Owen Hart, right at the end, where he says, I realize my pain is not, how did he put it? His death, but about...
It's not about his death, but my daughter's death.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's my pain.
It's my pain. I mean, it's such moral bankruptcy for politicians to say to victims' families, we're going to do this for you. They have to wait on average 17 years and to offer them a front row seat to watch as the state kills the one who killed their loved one. They get to watch that violence supposed to heal them. Look at that. But these people in their own journey of forgiveness come to that, but to give before, not to let the love and integrity be overtaken because a bad thing happened to us. That's good stuff.
Well, it's obviously, this opera is an opera that somehow has managed to, through the brilliance of its music and libretto, and the incredible story, your story, has captured kind of a sense of this national kind of debate and horror really that has pursued for all these decades. I guess that's Ivo. You didn't know what you were walking into when you when you stepped into this. It's such a passionate subject for America. Anyway, I think we're running out of time. Joyce, do you want to make a final comment you have for?
Sister, tell us something.
I'm just so, I'm so honored and so happy that, that you and Yannick are seeing the relevance and the direct impact that this art form can have on our everyday lives. and it can really help us. As Sister Helen, you always say that the theater is a communal safe space. You know, it's a place we gather and we all decide to play pretend for a couple hours. But to feel things that are real. There is such power in this art form to really touch people at a profound level. And I really applaud this direction. It can happen with any piece, but I think seeing our own stories up there on the stage in the spotlight in a real way, it's bold as well, and I think it's fantastic. And I think this is the pinnacle example of how we can look at our day right now and apply what we're going to experience on the stage to when we go home.
Thank you. Well said, Joyce. Thank you very much. A week from Tuesday is the opening night of Dead Man Walking. I think it will be a night that you should all be at. And I thank you, Ivo, for your brilliant and bold concept for this production, and I thank our amazingly, brilliantly talented stars, and I thank you, Sister Helen, for being the inspiration that brought us all together. Thank you so much.